We are on Memhei Yomad Beis 45b. We are at the Mishnah, which is in the middle of the page, right? There's two Mishnahs on this page. And the first one is 2 or 3 lines after the widest set of lines begin. So you'll see the big Mem Saf Nun Yud apostrophe, which stands for Masnisan, our Mishnah, and that's where we are. Yeah, have it.
Here?
That's it.
45b?
Yeah. Memhei Yomad Beis. You don't see it on the screen here. I'll highlight it for you. See it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, some further laws regarding the Egla Arufa. The Mishnah is still beginning with, or begins, I should say, with a description of that which qualifies, which is the discussion we began already. The first thing the Mishnah discussed was the Hebrew element, because that's the link to Masechta Sotah. Right, that's where it's all started. Because the Sotah law has a oath that the Kohen administers, and that's to be done in the original Hebrew. And from there, the Mishnah went on to discuss other mitzvahs that are to be done in the original Hebrew, while others that can be said in any language. And Egla Arufa, which has 2 speeches, one given by the elders of the city and one given by the Kohanim, the priests. Those speeches are to be delivered in the original Hebrew. So the Mishnah began with that. Having introduced that, the Mishnah went back to the beginning. What qualifies as an Egla Arufa? And it began with buried, hanging, floating, in the ground, on the ground, that whole discussion. So the Mishnah hasn't yet gone to what you actually do. It's still discussing who qualifies or what qualifies. Now, step 1 in the proceeding is that elders from Jerusalem come to measure, and we discussed who those elders are. Is it 3 elders? Is it 5 elders? Specifically from the high court? Is it all of the high court plus the king plus the high priest? And now they're here, they're about to measure. And what do they find when they measure? Well, ordinarily they'll find one city that's closest. In fact, we learned even if they know it's closest, you still have to measure, right? There's a mitzvah to measure. So now some laws around that, about the findings of the corpse and the measuring of the corpse before even the ritual begins. So the Mishnah therefore says as follows: Nimtza, if they find that the corpse is mechuvan, precisely bein shtei ayaros, between 2 cities, precisely between 2 cities. Shteihen, both of these cities, mevios, will bring shtei agolos, 2 calves, 1 from each city. Did we learn this Mishnah yet? I don't think so, right? No. Divrei Rabbi Lezer, these are the words of Rabbi Lezer. The Mishnah does not cite to a countering view, but the Gemara does frame it as these are the words of Rabbi Lezer, almost implying that there's a better way of thinking about it. Now, the Gemara itself is not going to directly explain what the other way of thinking about it is, but the Gemara is going to give Rabbi Elezer's thinking. And from Rabbi Elezer's thinking, Rashi is going to deduce and derive what would be the thinking if you don't agree with Rabbi Elezer. At the moment, Rabbi Elezer's view is that if you measure this corpse and you find that it's exactly precisely halfway between 2 cities, each city is to bring an Egla Arufa. This is Rabbi Elezer's view. Now, since we're discussing measuring to cities,
that would be the minority view if you're pointing out only to 1 city.
I don't know, because the Gemara does not say, and the sages say otherwise. Okay. So we have to look up the halacha. But as you can see here, remember I told you that you can always see when the Gemara cites the halacha based on that citation?
Yeah, the little...
Yeah. So this is the scholar who put together source notes to the Gemara, 3 sets of source notes to scripture, to other places in the Gemara that discuss the same subject, and then to halacha. So you see at the beginning of the Mishnah, there's a little gimel.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That indicates you'll find this statement in halacha. So presumably,
A little cheat.
cheat. Sorry?
It's always a gimel.
No, it
No.
will be a dalid or hey above next
Last
sign.
time it was a
Whatever. But there are different types of footnotes. There's the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to take you to the scripture. There's like the Rashi letters with a little half bracket next to it. That'll take you to other places in the Gemara where it discusses it. And then this bold letter takes you to the where it's found in halacha.
And that would be where if we were looking at
Top right. It's going to be in the inside margin. So it's either top right or top left.
Okay.
Or is it the outside margin? Wait, no, Memheim would be on that side. Sorry, it's the outside margin. Yeah, it's always in the outside margin. So, well, in this case, this is actually the outside because the folio is like that.
Oh.
Right. Okay. So this is Rabbi Lezer's view and seems to be the halacha as well. Now, having discussed measuring to cities, the Gemara tells us, the Mishnah tells us, the Ein Yerushalayim Mevia Egla Arufa. Yerushalayim does not qualify as the kind of city that would bring an Egla Arufa. Yerushalayim is not one of the cities that you measure to, and therefore doesn't bring an Egla Arufa.
Which city, sir?
Yerushalayim,
Oh.
Jerusalem. Maybe, okay. We have to look up the halacha to discover what happens if you measure it and it measures right near Jerusalem.
In Sefaria it says, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not bring the heifer whose neck is broken.
Right, that's the Egla Arufa.
Oh.
The Egla Arufa is the decapitated calf. That's this whole ritual to bring a decapitated calf to the place where there's a corpse.
Gotcha.
Right? So my question is, does that mean you don't measure Jerusalem and you skip it? Or does it mean measure to Jerusalem, and if Jerusalem is the closest city, Egla Arufa canceled? Or does the Mishnah mean, well, skip Jerusalem and measure to the next city?
Question.
Not clear. And the Gemara doesn't discuss it either. We have to look up the halacha, look up the Rambam to find out. Okay, Nimtza. Now, so that's halacha number 2. Halacha 1 is, if you find it exactly measured between 2 cities, then each of the 2 cities bring a Egla Arufa, each of them bring the calf. And the second halacha is that Yerushalayim does not bring a Egla Arufa at all. Nimtza, if it's found,
So if it's between,
sorry?
if it's equally between Yerushalayim and another city, then the other city would bring it, but not Yerushalayim.
Presumably.
So then
That seems
it
correct.
seems like you would skip and then go to the next city.
Maybe. Okay. Nimtza Roshai, if we find its
You're
head.
not canceling.
Sorry?
Well, you have the other city. No, I was thinking.
Right, exactly. Nimtza, as I said, that's a maybe, I don't know. Okay, Nimtza Roshai, if we find its head, the Mokem Echad in one place, for Gufoy and the body of the corpse, the Mokem Acher in another place. So where is the location? Okay, actually the Gemara doesn't tell us what this is about. But what do? You find you find that this
It's in pieces.
mystery, the mystery murder is decapitation. So the head's here and the body's there. So opinion number 1 is Ma'lichin Harosh Eitzel Haguf. You take the head, you bring it to the body. Give it Rabbi Lezer. This is the words of Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Kiva says the reverse, and this is the halacha. Haguf Eitzel Harosh. You bring the body to where the head is. That's halacha number 3. Halacha number 4. Even though halacha number 4 seems to be repetitive of halacha number 3, I'm dividing it into 4 because the Gemara is going to explain to us why it's divided. From where would they measure? Rabbi Lezer says, Miti burai, you measure from the navel, from the stomach.
It's like the center.
Yeah, the center of the body. Rabbi Kiva says, from the nose. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says, you measure from the point at which a person becomes a chalal. Chalal we described, which is the word the verse uses to describe corpse. We already said chalal means specifically a corpse slain by a metal of some sort, which is ordinarily Savare from the neck. So you measure from the nose, from the neck, or from the navel. So we have 4 halachas. Halacha 1 is if it's equal between 2 cities, each city brings an Egla Arufa. Halacha 2 is Yerushalayim doesn't bring an Egla Arufa. Halacha number 3 is dispute. Do you bring the head to the body to the head if you find them separated? And halacha number 3 is a 3-way dispute. From which part of the body do you measure? Which, even before you get to the Gemara, on the surface is still different than the previous dispute. Because this dispute here about where you measure from is even if the body is not in pieces. Even if the body just found whole, still, where do you measure from? It's a question. It could be a question of a foot apart, which would change. Are you going to that city or to that city? Yeah. So there's three-way dispute. Rabbi Eliezer says from the center of the body, the stomach. Rabbi Akiva from the nose. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says from the neck. The Gemara is now going to analyze the end from the Mishnah, and the Gemara is now going to analyze piece by piece each of these halachas, starting with the first halacha. My timer, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. What is the view of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov? What's the reason? Why does he say that 2 Egla Arufas are basically 2 rituals, 2 proceedings, one from each city? Why would we do that? Why would we have one from each city? Doubling up on the same ritual. The ritual is mainly to declare that we are not responsible for this death and to declare Hashem's forgiveness for this death, for this mystery murder.
I could see it if it were for 2 corpses. Yeah.
There are 2 corpses for sure. But here it's 1. Why 2 cities? So explains the Gemara, Kosavar, because Rabbi Eliezer is of the view that Efshel Tzamtzim, we, the high court in Jerusalem, has the capacity to be exacting. Tzamtzim means to literally like tzimtzum, to contract. We can be exact in our measuring. And therefore, when they measure from one city to the next, and they find that it's halfway between the 2 cities, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer does not assume that they made a mistake and they're off by an inch, or half an inch, or a quarter of an inch. Rabbi Eliezer assumes it's exactly halfway. If it's exactly halfway, we cannot put the burden on one over the other. And therefore they both have to. And from here, Rashi infers what the other view would be. Let's say you're of the view that you can't get exact. It's impossible for us to be exact, which means if we find that it is exact, we're off by a little bit, presumably by a half an inch, a quarter, a few centimeters, a few millimeters, we're off by something. Now, if we're off by something, then that means, as far as God's concerned, actually only one city has the obligation. So what would you do in that circumstance? If one of 2 cities have the obligation, but we're not sure which one it is, what would you do? So explains actually what you would do is, if you're of the view that we're not 100% sure, which means it's only one of the 2 cities that have the obligation. So what would we do? Explains Rashi. Each would bring an Egla Arufa, and each would make a condition. If our city is closer, and our Egla Arufa is valid. If our city is not closer, then your Egla Arufa is valid. And the other person does the same thing. And therefore, they do 2 proceedings, but only one is really valid.
It's like in Pesach, when you lose it.
There's lots of times when you do this.
And then it's found, and you're not sure which one.
There's many different cases like that where I make this condition. Yeah. If this is it, then this is it, and if this is it. Which means, from that perspective, only one is really truly an Egla Arufa. But because we don't know which one it is, they both bring with that condition. But Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov does not introduce any conditions. He just says straight up, they both bring. Why they're both bringing? Because they're both required to bring. And they're both, because it is exact.
It's known.
It is known.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. The other view is it's impossible to be exact, not just because we are human and we're fallible, but because things are always closer to one side or another. There's no such thing as something that's exactly halfway. It's just a question of how big a microscope is and how much you can zoom in. There's never like exact equal distance from one side. Right? Even if I took a paper and I made 3 lines, and I use the ruler to make the 3 lines. If I zoomed in close enough, I'm going to find that it's a tiny, tiny fraction closer to one side than the other. Right? Which means, in the other view, it's never equal. It's just a question of whether or not we know or not. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer is of the view if you measured equal to both sides, then that's it. It's equal to both sides. And if that's the case, both are required to bring. No condition. They're both required. Okay. Now we run into a problem, which is the verse reads, the kroiva. When the verse describes the bringing of the Egla Arufa, it says, and the elders of the city that is closest to the corpse. And the word there is kroiva, closest. That word kroiva is in the singular. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer is of the view that it could be two cities. So why would the verse use kroiva in the singular? Follow the question. In Rabbi Eliezer view, two cities can be obligated.
Maybe we're talking about one.
Well, then where do you derive obligation for two cities? Exactly, there's the question. If the verse says singular, why are you saying two cities? It's pretty straightforward. Yeah? With or no? Yeah. So answers the Gemara, afil kroivos, even if they're closest in the plural. What? What's your answer? So explains Rashi that there are times when the verse can use a singular term, but the singular term is not to describe one, but to describe an entity. So say in English, you would say, let's say, fruit is plural. Let's just say the human race.
Greater metropolitan.
That's right. It's a singular term. Actually, it actually uses the word greater. He cites a verse which uses the word rabba, greater. When you, it's right. You can use the singular to describe the multiples that are in that singular group. Right. So like in English, like the human race. When I say the human race, I don't mean one singular human. I mean the totality of human race, which means many, many humans. So you can use a singular term not to describe a singular entity, but to describe a singular category, which can include in it more than one. So when the verse says that's closest to the city, it doesn't mean one singular that's closest, but any that are in the category of closest, even if two happen to be closest. That's it. But let's understand this verse. Okay, so that's as far as halacha number one goes, which means even though the Gemara, the Mishnah does not state a dispute, it seems to be inferred that there might be one. There's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's view. I keep on saying Ben Yaakov, I'm not sure why. Because later in the Mishnah, there's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So it's in my head. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer says that it is that when we measure equal to two cities, it is indeed equally near two cities, and therefore both are required, versus the other view, not explicitly stated. But what's inferred by Rashi is that because we don't know exactly which one's closest, but only one is, therefore both would bring, but they don't both bring out of validity, they both bring out of doubt, and thus they each have to make a condition that the ritual we're doing is only valid if we are closest, but if we are not closest, then our ritual is invalid. And so the other one makes the same condition.
Doesn't make that condition.
That's correct. Now,
what does he do in that case?
Both bring a Egla Arufa because they're both required.
Right, but they're not really exact.
In Rabbi Eliezer view, they are exact.
Okay, that's what I said. So he doesn't make that condition because.
Right. No.
Right.
We're on the same page.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Sorry, what are we missing?
No, nothing. But they don't. The Gemara doesn't follow that view, right?
That does follow the view of Rabbi Eliezer. I'm saying inferred from the Gemara's description of Rabbi Eliezer, one could deduce what might the counter opinion be, which is what Rashi introduces for us. But the Gemara doesn't itself, neither does the Mishnah, give us that counter view. But from the reasoning behind Rabbi Eliezer, Rashi deduces what you might say if you didn't think that way.
Okay.
Right. So Rabbi Eliezer view is you can measure exact, and therefore both are required. Which means if I was the view that I don't measure exact, what would I do? They each would bring making that condition. That would be the counter view.
That's the counter
If we were, it's the inferred counter view based on the reasoning that the Gemara gives for Rabbi Eliezer. Okay. Now comes halacha number 2. Continues the Gemara. Ve'ein Yerushalayim the Egla Arufa. Yerushalayim does not bring the Egla Arufa. Why? Amar Kra, because the verse says, L'rishta. The opening verse is Ki Matzeh Chalal Badama. When you find a mystery corpse, mystery murder on the ground. We analyze what that meant on the ground. And then it says on the ground that God, your Lord, will give you as an inheritance. So the verse could have just said, on the ground that God your Lord will give you. Why add as an inheritance? That God the Lord will give you. Does that not imply the land of Israel? Certainly does. Why add the word as an inheritance? Well, because there are certain parts of the land of Israel that have been granted to you, but not an inheritance. Namely, because Savar, this Mishnah is of the view that and this is the halacha, that Yerushalayim loy nischalka l'shvatim, was not divided amongst the tribes, but equally given to everyone. And when the verse says it as an inheritance, it's specifically referring to the division of the land by the tribes, which was then later divided by family, which then later each family inherits from their original family who was divided by the land then. So when the verse uses the description as an inheritance to describe Eretz Yisrael, it's specifically talking about the parts of the land that you would inherit from your father and he from his father back to the tribes. And Yerushalayim, which is not divided by the tribes, but it's not inheritable. It's left as a international city, national city that belongs equally to all people. And because the verse describes the Egla Arufa specifically as in the land that God gives you as an inheritance, and Yerushalayim is not inheritable, therefore, Yerushalayim is not part of the Egla Arufa. Halacha number 3. Nimtza roishe cholu. Halacha number 3, number 4, as I mentioned, although they aren't phrased the same, they might be seen as redundant. Halacha number 3 was a dispute. If you find the corpse decapitated, the head's in one location and the body's in another, do you bring the head to the body or the body to the head? No. If I were to leave it there, what is the Mishnah arguing about? It's in the context of Egla Arufa, and therefore you bring the body to the head and then you do what? You bring the head to the body and you do what?
That's the point of measuring.
Oh, it seems to be that the question is, what's the point of measuring? If you measure from the body, bring the head to the body. If you measure from the head, bring the body to the head. If that's the case, then it's redundant. The next dispute right there is, do you measure from the center of the stomach or do you measure from the nose? Is that not the same dispute? And it's the same people speaking. It's Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Akiva. Even though the one who says from the nose is Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, and the one who says to bring the head to the body is Rabbi Lezer. But even if it's not the same people, the disputes are certainly parallel. Because presumably what the Mishnah means when it says bring the body to the head or the head to the body means, well, which one do you measure from? If that's the case, it's the exact same thing as halacha number 4. This is what the Gemara asks. What is the point of this dispute, which says you bring the body to the head or the head to the body? Ilema, should you suggest, as we all just assumed now, le'inyan medida, that they are disputing at which point do you measure from? Because we're in the context of Egla Arufa. So presumably, if you're telling me to bring the body to the head or the head to the body, we're discussing, well, where do you measure from? And if you measure from the head, bring the body to the head. And if you measure from the body, bring the body to the head. This is what they are disputing, presumably. Are you with me? Or, yeah? Says the Gemara, but, me the katani, from the fact that we learned seifa in the very next clause, quote, from where do they measure? Michlal, the implication is, the first clause, the preceding clause, which is clause number 3, is not a question of where do you measure from, because otherwise it's completely redundant. Following the Gemara's question?
It's completely redundant because
it's the same dispute.
The next halakha is talking about the nose. And
the next halakha discusses where do you measure from, and halakha before discussed what? If you bring the body to the head or the head to the body, which presumably means where do you measure from? It's the same dispute.
right.
The first one is not as clear because the first one doesn't say which part of the body or which part of the head you measure. It just says bring one to the next. But if that's only a question of measuring, then wrap it up into one big dispute.
You have to call that interpretation into question. It's already been discussed in the following halakha.
That's correct. So therefore, we have to come to some other reason for why they would dispute if you bring the body to the head or the head to the body. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, this is talking about a halacha that isn't related to Egla Arufa directly, but it's related to Egla Arufa indirectly.
Which one? The head and the body?
The head and the body versus the body to the head. It's a halacha that's indirectly related to Egla Arufa. It actually gives us a very beautiful lesson, which is as follows. The meis mitzvah kana makaymai kamifigli. They're disputing a unique halacha, which is a meis mitzvah. Meis mitzvah literally means the mitzvah of a dead. Now, this is referring to a corpse that's found, and we have no next of kin. We have no one to claim relation to this body, and therefore no heirs, and therefore no one to lay the obligation of burial on. So ordinarily, the obligation to bury someone falls on the next of kin, and here we have no next of kin. So it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah on whoever finds this body to give it its proper Jewish burial. The halacha is meis mitzvah, a meis mitzvah, one such corpse that has no one to claim, kana makaymai, acquires its place. It's buried right there. You don't have to pay for any plot because there is no heirs. It's a mitzvah upon all Jews. So where is he buried? He acquires the spot that he's in and buried right there. We don't actually do this in practice. We bring them to a cemetery, and we have places, and many, if not all cemeteries, have some location that's mitzvah, that's free of charge, and they bury this person there. But in its core, this is brought down in Rambam, actually, I think, that the mitzvah acquires its place. And that is the dispute here. When the body is separated from the head, which spot in the ground does his body acquire? The spot of the head or the spot of the body? There's a dispute.
They have to be buried together.
Yeah.
So we're back to our question, which we.
Oh, so now we're saying it's two different disputes. One leads to the next. Which what the Gemara is basically, what the Mishnah is basically doing for us, and the Gemara is doing to us, is telling us, you're busy doing this whole Egla Arufa thing because you're trying to get atonement for the community, and it's not our responsibility. We didn't do this murder. But while you're doing all of this and saving yourselves, giving yourselves a pass, and giving yourselves atonement, don't forget the dignity of the person who is dead here. Make sure you give him a proper burial. And therefore, the Gemara interjects right here, what's the halacha of where it's buried? And make sure to give him his dignity as a Jewish soul who died. There's a beautiful lesson here. Even as you're busy, they literally wash their hands clean of this death. So you're busy saving yourself, but don't forget to give this poor fellow the dignity he deserves.
I think it also goes back to the measuring point. Because the belly button, let's say it's the belly button.
No, so you can actually be on both sides of the coin. So let's say you're of the view that the head acquired a spot for burial.
Right.
So you would measure from the stomach, but then move the stomach to the head to bury it.
Exactly.
In theory. Or you measure from the head and then move the head to the body to bury it. So the measuring and the burying spot doesn't necessarily have to be in the same spot. They're two different disputes.
Right.
So you can be on one side of the coin in one place and another on the other side, in theory.
Oh, okay.
We're going to see how the Gemara is going to discuss it, that maybe not necessarily.
Measure from the body position for let's say the belly button.
But then
you move it for the burial.
Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
We'll have to see if this is true or not. Tomorrow we'll see how the Gemara gets to what's the rationale behind the dispute as to where you measure from, and maybe that ends up being linking to where you're buried, but not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Does this put a primacy on the head over the body?
The Gemara will at the end. And
Thinking because that's
Chassidus does quote this Gemara that we're going to see, and it comes to also questions of heart transplants. We'll talk about that tomorrow. This Gemara is also brought up in the question of heart transplants, so we'll discuss that tomorrow. Okay, but let's conclude the Gemara here. So let's now that we know this, now that we know there's two disputes here. One is where do you bury the body, and number two is where do you measure from. Now let's, using that interpretation, let's revisit the Mishnah. That's what the Gemara does. V'hachika Amar. And here's how you should read the Mishnah. L'koivroi, as far as burying it goes, kana mekaimoi, the corpse acquires its location. That's the halacha. You find that under death with no claimants, a corpse with no next of kin, he acquires a spot and is buried right there. And in a situation where you find the head in one location, the gufa in the body and you find the body in a different location, You bring the head to the body to bury it there. This is Rabbi Lezer's view. But Rabbi Kiva says, Haguf eitz al harosh. You bring the body to the head and bury it there. And b'mayim kamifali, what would be the root of their dispute? See, over here the Gemara gives one reason, one underpinning dispute or underpinning rationale for why you would either move the head to the body to the head. And tomorrow the Gemara is going to give a different rationale for why you measure from one location to the other, which means you can be on opposite sides of the coin on each of these questions because there are two different underpinning rationales. Specifically, Mar Savar, the one who says that you bury him in the spot of his body and you bring the head there, is gufe bedukte nafel, because the body falls in its spot. And reisha the not even nafel, but it's the head that rolls and falls. In other words, when it comes to acquiring the piece of land in which this body is found dead, it's a question of where did it fall to its death? Mm-hmm. And view number one is, well, the body falls right there, presumably along with the head, but then the head rolls off, which means what's the spot that it acquired where the body is? That's Rabbi Lezer's view. But Amar Savar, Rabbi Kiva's view is Reichsha Heicha the Nafel. The head, wherever it falls, That's its place of death. And Gufa, it's the body who deroid va'azil, that is the one that leaves, is the one that moves and leaves. How this works out physically, I don't know. Meaning, if I were to use this description just literally physically, it's the head that falls wherever it falls, and the body moved and went. The body moved and went after the body.
Well, falling and rolling are two different things. Also.
Right. So the word rolling is not used.
And then roll.
Right. So that's a Lezer's description. The body falls, right. It acquires that spot, and then the whole head rolled off. The language of the other way is exactly like this. The body, wherever it falls, meaning wherever it lands, it lands. I'm sorry, the head, wherever it lands, it lands. But the body is the one. Rohit means Rohit means it's like propelled. Ozil and went. What does that mean? The body walked up and walked away? What does this mean? So on the literal level, I can't explain it. But with poetic license, I could explain it. Meaning to say, the human is in the head. So wherever the head is, that's the human that falls. It's the body that's been decapitated from the head, not the head decapitated from the body. Which was decapitated from who? Was the head decapitated from the body, or was the body decapitated from the head? So the second view is, well, the human, the Jew, is in the head. That's where the human is. And it's the body that's been disconnected from the head. So the fact that the body fell, if the head's still moving, then the person hasn't fallen yet. Because the person's in the head. So wherever the head falls, that's where the human fell. And it's the body that happened to have not come along. So poetic license kind of thing.
Chickens.
Yeah. But in like a sort of spiritual way of thinking about this, in the Hasidic way of thinking about this, we can talk about it in terms of the relationship between Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jewish people, between a Rebbe and Chassidim. Right? As we learn in Tanya chapter 2, all Jewish souls are really, actually, the Gemara uses a similar language, that all Jewish souls are one great spiritual body. The Gemara says that Mashiach will come when all the neshamas that are in the guf, that are in the body, will descend to this world, as if to say there's a spiritual body up in heaven from which the souls emerge. And what's the point of this metaphor? The point of this metaphor is that at the core level, all Jews are one entity. Just like my body shares one essential DNA, because it comes from one and the same seed, from one and the same father. This is the terminology in Tanya chapter 2. So all souls are really one big spiritual body. And the question is only, which part of the body is each individual Jewish soul? Am I at the toenail of the great Jewish body? Or am I the head of the Jewish body? And that's why the souls of the righteous, the souls of the tzaddikim, the rebbes, are considered the head and the heart. Which is why it's so important to connect to a tzaddik. Just like in order for the finger to stay alive, it must connect to the heart and the head. So too, a neshama, if it wants to stay spiritually alive and spiritually, if it wants to have its own connection to Hashem, it must be connected to the head, to the tzaddik. Just like if my finger wants to have a relationship with my father, it's got to be connected to my head. Right? So likewise, if a Jew wants to have a proper connection to Hashem, he must be connected to the tzaddik. And this is how the Alter Rebbe explains the Gemara, which says that anyone who connects to the Talmidei Chachamim, kilu dovek b'shchina, it's as if he connected to the shchina, to the presence of Hashem. Yeah. So now the Gemara is describing a decapitation. The tzaddik service of Hashem is going, but the rest of the Jewish people are cut off. Right? The rest of the people are not following on with the tzaddik, and therefore there's a spiritual death. Right? So, who is to be dragged to who to reconnect? Is it on the Jewish people to make sure that they're connected to the Rebbe? Or is it on the Rebbe to go and make sure he's in communication with his body? On the spiritual level, maybe this is the discussion here. And perhaps it's a combination of both, because both are correct. It's on every chassid to make sure he's connected to his Rebbe, and it's on every Rebbe to make sure he's communicating in such a way that his chassidim can understand. So the body is going to be taken to the head, and the head is going to be taken to the body. Because obviously, all opinions in Torah are correct, certainly on their spiritual level. Okay, so tomorrow, God willing, we'll get to the next clause, the fourth and final clause of this Mishnah, which is the dispute as to where you measure from. And three opinions: neck, head, or stomach, from the navel. And this is going to lead us to the formation of a fetus, which, as I just mentioned, is going to touch a little bit upon the chassidus of the neshama, which we'll discuss tomorrow, as well as question of heart transplant also comes up in relation to this Gemara. Okay, so that's a good question. It's not discussed, it's not directly in the Mishnah, but I would assume that if you're of the opinion you measure from the stomach, then you first you can only measure from where it's fallen. So if you measure from the stomach, you measure from that spot where it is. Even if you have to move it later to bury it somewhere else, you still have to move.
That's part of the body.
That's correct. Even if you were to have to move the stomach to the head to bury it,
first measure.
If you're of the opinion that you measure from the stomach, you first have to measure from there and then move the body over.
Okay.
I would presume.
Sure about that.
Or at least put a pin in the ground as to where it was.
Decide what's being moved, and then after that's established, then you make the measurement.
But then it would make the disputes redundant. You're trying to make them two different disputes. Or maybe they're linked. I'll leave it.
Right.
But I could see theoretically how one could say one or the other.
Right. No, for sure.
Meaning you can be on both sides.
Yeah.
Although, at least Rabbi Kiva is the same person speaking in both disputes. The first one's Rabbi Lezer, the second one's Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. Is that the same person? I don't know. I assume not. Otherwise, I would say Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov twice. No, sorry. There's two Rabbi Lezers here. One Rabbi Lezer and one Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. So Rabbi Lezer himself says you measure from the stomach, who's the same one that says to bring the head to the bottom. And Rabbi Kiva is the one who says measure from the nose, and he's the one who says to bring the body to the head. So the two people are the same people disputing. So obviously they line up. But in theory, it's a different dispute because in theory you could be saying a combination of both. Although in reality, as I just mentioned, I thought that was correct, that Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Kiva are two disputants. And we have the third view, which is Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, that says that you measure from the neck. So it's not the same person, obviously not. It's like one of those things that are so obvious, you just skip it. Okay.
There's fun circumstances when there's a bunch of bodies next to each other, or if they're piled up on top of each other.
So the pile up top of each other we discussed once. You have to measure from each one.
From the top head.
You have to measure from each one. And if they're half an inch off, then it could be one's closer to the city and one closer to that city. So you have to measure each one. At least according to the views that say that they both qualify. If it's not considered buried, it's considered buried. We discussed that at great length. Okay, wonderful day, Yidden. And Mr. Shem, more tomorrow.